part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Good day, everybody, and welcome to Sable Brothers on the Baseline Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Sable.
And I'm your other host, John Sable. How you guys doing?
With us today, and it's a very special podcast here, we are in a suite at Progressive Field, about 45 minutes before a Guardians game here on a Friday. And joining us is longtime Cleveland Indians manager and player, Mike Hargrove. Mike, it is a pleasure to have you on our podcast. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, I think. Because my wife's not mad at me yet, so I'm all right.
All right, so Mike, we got a lot of stuff to cover here. I'm sure a lot of great stories and a lot of great questions about your career as a player and your career as a manager. But first and foremost, what are you up to? How many games do you get to during the course of the season?
Gosh, Scott, we probably get to, on the average, year in, year out, about 30, 35 games. When I first went to work for the Guardians or the Indians, at that time, we came every night. And after about 5 years of that, I thought, I don't necessarily need to do that anymore. I can watch them on TV. But so we cut back to about 30, 35 games.
Still a decent amount.
Yeah.
It's quite more than what we're attending. But as fans or members of the media, you still get your dose of baseball. But it's a good balance for you, too, because of family and grandkids, too.
And golf. Yeah.
And golf, yeah. What are you golfing nowadays?
I'm not very good. My handicap is about a 8 or 9. So
nice.
I hold my own. It's just good enough that I lose money.
Well, you're better than I, because I'm so bad I don't bet money when I play golf.
I shouldn't.
For fans that grew up watching you as a player and then obviously as a manager, and throughout your progression of your professional career, what are you up to now? Obviously, you said that you're back and forth here, watching games. But what are you doing now?
Well, my title with the Guardians is a special advisor to the president, which is really just a glorified consultant. If they have want my opinion on certain things, they'll call and ask my opinion, and we'll talk about it. But I don't do a whole lot of that. I mainly have big sponsors at the game, or I play a lot of charity tournaments with some of our sponsors, and if they're at the game, I'll go over and make a sweet visit and talk to them 10, 15 minutes and sign autographs for a while. So it's evolved really into more of a PR thing than anything.
You like it?
Yeah.
It's relaxing, right?
Well, yeah, it really is, and it doesn't take away from my enjoyment of the game, and it doesn't take away from my enjoyment of being free during the day. For 38, 40 years, I lived by a schedule, as you guys still do. And it's kind of nice not having that schedule. And the Indians, the Guardians, have been very, very good to me. I've got a lot to be thankful for.
Well, we're in your suite here at Progressive Field, and I can't help but notice the walls here are just, it's going to take me probably a day just to digest everything here, from old baseball cards to pictures from the 70s to stuff that maybe, fans our age, would remember. Did you have any say in the decoration here?
No, Sharon did.
Your wife did it all.
It's like my marriage. I learned to say yes dear real early on.
Yeah.
This is probably maybe a tenth of what we have at the house down in our basement. So we've got a lot of stuff, and she kind of sectioned it off. And the thing that most of the people that come in here that haven't been in here, the thing they key in on is the picture of the 10-cent beer night when I was with the Rangers, and the picture of me arguing with the umpire. And so I've got to just kind of look at everything in between.
Now, I was in here with you last October doing the anniversary of the '97 World Series run. While the Guardians were in the playoffs, you and I were in here doing a story for Fox 8, and I remember asking you that picture over there of you arguing with that umpire.
Yeah.
Did you get thrown out of that game?
Sure. There was the only thing that kept us from bumping chins was our bellies wouldn't let us. So, yeah.
Scott mentioned the baseball cards. They're behind us here. So you have an entire, 25 baseball cards?
I've never counted them, yeah.
25, Scott?
Yeah,
if
25,
I can do math.
Yeah.
Of you.
Well, those are all the baseball cards that, from my rookie year with the Rangers to my last year with the Indians, and all of them in between.
How did you get? I remember growing up watching you, especially your last year with the Indians as a player was 1985, and my dad always told me, "Hey, that's the human rain delay." How did you get that nickname?
Well, I had a routine. It was way before my time. You watch golfers nowadays; they talk about pre-shot routine. I had the pre-pitch routine, and it's something that's developed over the years. I figure the key to doing anything well or doing it as best as you possibly can is concentration. And if there's any little thing that's maybe distracting you a little bit or taking away from that concentration, then you really end up cheating yourself. So there were things that bothered me. I didn't like a crease in my glove between my bat, my hand, and the bat. I didn't like, felt like my shoulder, the shirt would hang up on my shoulder, or felt like my pants were falling down. I pulled them up. Just things that I identified over the years that I got out of the way before every pitch, and it allowed me to concentrate. Now, I was doing that, in I believe it was in Toronto one day, and after the game, I think it was one of our reporters said that I'd been christened by a Toronto reporter as the human rain delay, and that stuck.
Did you like that?
Really stuck.
Did you like that nickname?
What? It doesn't bother me. It's kind of funny, but the thing, I did an interview with a reporter out of Amarillo back in 1980. And he said, "What do you want your legacy to be as a player when you're done?" And I said, "Well, I like it to be I was a good player. I played hard all the time, and if you came to the ballpark and paid admission, you never got cheated." The sad thing is that I'll be remembered as that idiot that did things between pitches at the plate, and sure enough, that's what's happened.
You couldn't get away with that now with the pitch clock.
No. I'd have to cut some of them out.
I know we'll talk about some players here in a moment from your managerial days, but when Scott mentioned human rain delay, growing up watching Manny Ramirez, and correct me if I'm wrong, both of you, when Manny first got called up, he had a lot of twitches. He was he took a long time to get ready in the box. My memory serves me correct me on that?
Yeah, there've been a few over here. Nomar Garcia-Parra did. Carlton Fisk did. I don't know. There were 4 or 5 that did, and Manny obviously did too. And it's a time for you to kind of get your mind in order. What was the pitch that was just thrown? What's the count? What's his out pitches, his strike pitches, and you just kind of prepare yourself to look for a certain pitch and a certain count. And it worked for me.
Let's go back to the 10-cent beer night, because it's just a day that lives in infamy here in Cleveland. But it happened, in other, maybe not that type of. The violence, but I mean, they had 10-cent beer nights in other places. So it kind of gets a bad rap because of everything that happened that evening. You were there. What do you remember from that stands out?
I remember, let's see, a few things. I remember that there was, you ever heard, Thunderbird wine? You ever heard of Thunderbird wine? Mm-hmm. They sold it in gallon jugs. Mm-hmm. I had an empty gallon jug of Thunderbird wine hit about 10 foot behind me when I was on the field. I kicked it off the side thinking, well, the ground crew come out and get it, but no, some fan jumped out of the stands, ran out, picked up the bottle, ran back and jumped back into the stands. And I'm thinking, well, I probably should. I'm gonna visit that jug of wine again tonight before it's all over with. That and the father and son that went and moved everybody from center field, the guy that streaked and ended up. He had 2 black socks on. All he had on. He tried to get over the center field fence, and one of the guards jumped up to grab him, came down with 1 black sock. So wow. It was a mess. It started off small, people running back and forth between innings, between right field and left field, and it just grew. By the time the 8th inning rolled around, it was just a constant stream of people, and that's when it all broke loose.
How did everybody get out of the stadium, players? Did you guys stay in the clubhouse until everything simmered down?
We stayed in the clubhouse probably a good 4 hours after they called the game. And then when we left, we had a police escort back to, we stayed at the old Holland House. And they let us out and escorted us into the hotel and told us to go to our rooms and not come down until noon the next day. So a lot of us went hungry that night. So,
oh my goodness. Wow. We talked with former Fox 8 colleague. He still helps out on Friday Night Football. Dan Coughlin, you remember Dan Coughlin?
Oh God, how can you forget that? Yeah.
Danny, we had him on our podcast last year, and he covered that as a reporter.
Yep.
And he was telling us he got punched in the face by a kid. Do you remember that?
You also wonder somebody had punched Dan in the face before that.
Yeah. Well, you're right.
And Dan's a good man. Yeah, it was. I heard that he got punched.
I think Danny's quote was, "Yeah, I've been punched much worse."
Yeah.
But he had some interesting stories from that night too. But it would just been crazy to think to be a player in that situation and then to see the everything unraveled.
It wasn't real when it just got bad. It wasn't scary. And if the Indians players came out and helped us, if they hadn't come out and helped us, I don't know what would have happened. But it wasn't scary until I got into the clubhouse, and then you hit the impact of it all hit you, and thought, it's a wonder somebody didn't get hurt really, really bad.
Yeah, can you imagine if that happened nowadays?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about 10-cent beer night, Old Cleveland Stadium. Do you have any stories about playing in that stadium from back in the 70s, early 80s? Because it was a strange place.
Yeah, it was strange. I just remember that's the only ballpark that I ever went into. I'd walk in the door to go to the clubhouse, and I instantly felt like I needed to take a shower. That's what There's probably people that have real fun memories of that place, but I didn't. I didn't. I was when we got out of there. It was a good thing for us to get out.
I know from talking to you before, you have some pieces of memorabilia from the stadium. You have a original Municipal Stadium seat at home, I believe, right?
Yep.
Anything else from this stadium besides like your jerseys as a player and as a manager before you moved here at Progressive Field?
No, I think that's it. Yeah, we got that, and a friend of mine named Paul Molnar was in the process of refinishing it, and he ended up passing away. But so it just never really got done. But it's still there. So yeah.
Before we kind of get into the 90s, I want to ask you one more question about your memorabilia in here. Your favorite pictures, you said a picture of you and an umpire where you got tossed, your 10-cent beer night. Anything else of a picture in here or a jersey, anything that has a cool story behind it that we don't know about?
I think there's one in here with me and my son standing.
Is it right there?
Well, that is my son. Yeah, that's him, but he was much bigger. That must be at home.
Yeah.
That's probably my favorite picture. Him sitting on my lap. He's eating that Twinkie.
Is it a Twinkie?
Yeah,
look like
yeah.
a
Twinkie,
yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Yeah, we Scott and I love the history of baseball and love little things like that. That's why we were wondering and kind of gauge your interest on that kind of stuff. Okay, 90s, you were at the front of what had become a dynasty, you and John Hart, in the early 90s. It started before you moved in this ballpark. Mm-hmm. It started, 92, 93, and even before that, too.
Well, in 92 and 93, we our record in 92 was the same as it was in 93. Mm-hmm. Exact same. We got there different ways, but just exact same. But we'd go in and play teams, and managers and the coaches would come up to me before the game and say, "You guys there's something good going on here. You guys, have a chance down the road." And that always gave us a little bit of hope and to think maybe we were making the right decisions and keeping the right players, and it all came together. And this. We designed a thing and to last not only just 1 or 2 years, but to last a number of years, and we were successful in that too. It's something that I think John and Dan O'Dowd and I are all real proud of being a part of. There are a lot of people that had their hand in getting that thing to where it was.
Even did Hank Peters back in the late 80s, I know some of the seeds were even set then, right? Late 80s, around 1990, you trade Joe Carter, you trade, because you knew you were going to lose him to free agency. Right. A lot of those players that were aging in the late 80s that kind of set the stage for, what was to become that dynasty.
Yeah, Hank Peters came in here and real unheralded. He was one of the top general managers in the game, but did his job here for me was unheralded because he really laid the foundation for the direction we went. He hired the right people, myself included. He brought John Hart over, and John worked under him for a couple of years. He brought in Dan O'Dowd to run the farm system, and he hired the right people that had a passion for what they were doing, and then he let us work. And he really let us work. And Hank, but Hank was he was kind of the architect of it all, and John and Dan and I kind of just followed his lead.
Some of those moves back in those days, the acquiring of Sandy Alomar and Kenny Lofton, and drafting Manny Ramirez and Jim Thome and getting Albert Bell and Charles Nagy, all those, it just became a perfect storm. And then eventually the trade of getting Omar Vizquel too.
Well, that was a big one. Felix Fermin was the shortstop here, and Felix, I love Felix.
Oh, I remember Felix Fermin.
He could play the game, played it right. He was a really, really good player. Felix just was never going to be able to hit as much as we thought he should. And when we had a chance to bring in Vizquel, he was a lot the same player. Omar wasn't hitting a whole lot then either. But he was just a magician with a glove. But the thing, he was much younger than Felix was. And so the chance to bring him over was a real big thing for us. And as we had him, our strength and conditioning people, Fernando Montes and people like that really helped Omar get a lot stronger. And Omar loved to hit the high fastball. He just couldn't hit it. And so we drilled him incessantly about getting the ball down. And, just getting the ball down. And when it finally clicked for him and he started getting the ball down, making them get the ball down, he started being the hitter that we thought he could be.
When you moved into this ballpark with 94, and then, of course, what happened with 95, I mean, walk me through some of those game-winning come-from-behind moments. I mean, watching it as a kid, as a fan, with my brother and with my dad, it was just in awe. We didn't know what was happening. It was something out of a movie.
Well, during that spell in '95, Jose Mesa was very, very good for us, and there were times we would go into the ninth inning down 1 or 2 runs, and we'd have Jose up throwing in the bullpen, not hard, just playing catch, getting ready. If we need to heat him up, he can heat up real quick. And people would ask me, how in the world did you know to get Jose up? What were you thinking? I was thinking that, my 9-hole hitter is hitting 30 home runs. I've got him in the ninth. We've got a real good chance, any time to score 2 or 3 runs in anything. So your job as a manager is to plan for the best and hope the worst doesn't happen. So that's just kind of the direction we went.
When you guys got to the World Series that year, '95, and going through that magical run of beating Boston and Seattle, when you're going into a series like that, unfamiliar for everyone involved, but then you're going up against arguably the greatest rotation in baseball history.
They were pretty good, weren't they?
Yeah.
Well, they were awfully good. Maddox and Glavine and Smoltz and those guys, they were awfully good in their own right anyway, but they also were getting pitches 6 to 8 inches off the plate, called strikes.
Yes.
Yeah, there were some questionable calls in that series, especially the last one.
That was a complaint that was leveled against that rotation all year long.
Yeah.
And that's not an excuse for us losing. It really is not. But it sure makes when they had the kind of stuff they have and the command that they have, and they could, catcher sits up off the plate and he hit the glove. The umpires at that time called those strikes. We knew that going in, and believe me, I'm not using this as an excuse at all, but it certainly makes it a lot more difficult when that happens, and they were on their game. I mean, they got Smoltz, Glavine, and Maddox are all in the Hall of Fame. That says a lot about who they are.
Yeah.
And you saw a lot of players. I remember Albert Bell hit a home run, took those outside pitches opposite field.
Yeah.
So the Indians, they were seeing those pitches. They knew they were coming, and they were hitting it the opposite way, which you should do in a situation like that.
They are, yeah, but it's so hard to get the barrel, the sweet spot of the bat, the barrel of the bat on a ball that's that far off the plate. And Albert's just a doggone strong. That he could do a lot of things with the baseball nobody else could do.
How did you manage the different personalities? I mean, there were so many different personalities without naming any names, but how did you manage them, and how did you command the respect of everyone because of all those personalities?
Well, it's the respect part of it. I had that respect going in because I'd been a player and been a good player, so all the players understood that I'd been where they were. And so, that respect was kind of, inbred in that. But then you got to do things along the line to keep that respect. And I found that, I played for 11 different managers in my 12-year career as a player. I think that might have been an indictment on my talent. I got 11 of them fired. But
That's funny.
The one thing that I came away with that I got from all of them was that the men that coached me, if they were honest with me, then they got more out of me than if I had to wonder if they're just saying something to make me get out of their office. So I really tried to do that with all the players. I think I was successful most of the time. There were times that didn't happen, but not very often. I always told the players, the first meeting you have in spring training is probably the most important meeting you'll have all year, where you set your ground rules and what you expect. And I told them, I said, you can come into my office anytime to ask a question. Just be prepared for the answer. Don't come in and think I'm going to tell you something to get you out of my office. I will tell you the truth as I know it today. Now, in baseball, the truth today may not be the truth 3 days from now. But when you ask a question, I will tell you the truth. Just be man enough to accept that and be sure that's what you want to do. And I think the players responded that well.
Well, they certainly respected you, too. They all gravitated and loved you as their manager.
I hope so. I sure love them, too.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
What's up everyone? I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Tybus Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need to get you through the regular season, hopeful postseason, and I'd say off-season, Tyvis, but is there really ever an off-season for this team?
Thankfully for our podcast, Holly, there really never is when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. Don't miss our breakdown of each week's matchup, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
Yes, they do. So hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Orange is Oranger, Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hi, everybody. It's John Tellage from the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast. Be sure to hop on with us to follow all the dramatic developments of the reigning American League Central Division champions. From game analysis to interviews to keeping tabs on who could be the next breakout star. We'll have that and much, much more right here. It's the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe here and join the fun.
So we got two, and these are two stories having to do with Albert Bell. All right, and they're famous ones.
Right.
The first one was the corked bat day,
Yeah.
which we've seen a million times on YouTube, and it's always on
94,
TV.
right? Was that 94?
Yeah, 94,
In Chicago.
95.
It was 94 or 95. It might have been 95. No, 95.
Okay.
Yeah,
You know,
At
it-
Comiskey Park.
At Comiskey,
Take us to that day. We saw what happened, and we know the aftermath and all that. But take us to the dugout when all that was going down.
Well, before that, probably a week before that, I had heard rumors that Albert was using a doctored bat. I didn't know whether it was true or not, so I called Albert into my office. I said, Albert, I have no idea if you're doing this or not, but if you are, you've got to stop because you don't need it. I mean, you don't need this. And the only thing that's going to happen is if it happens, everything that you've done this game now is going to be questioned, and it won't be good for you or the ball club. And he said, okay. And then sure enough, we went to Comiskey right after the All-Star break, and he hit that. I think he hit a home run, and they came out and got his bat and checked it, I think they threw him out of the game.
Mm-hmm. They did.
And kept the bat and took it back in the umpire's room. And when they did that, I thought, oh no, he didn't. Albert didn't listen. So that was during the game. About 2-3 innings later, I walked back into my office to use the bathroom, and there was a guy, one of our people, standing there underneath, above my locker. The locker I had in my office was a drop ceiling, and one of the tiles was out, and this guy was standing under that deal. I said, "What's going on?" Shh, 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 shh. So and so was over in the umpire's dressing room. I said, "Oh man!" And sure enough, he went over and got the bat and put a different one in its place. And the sad thing is that Comiskey has They had more cameras in Comiskey than they do here at Progressive Field.
And that's in the mid-'90s.
Yeah, and they had his bat in a big panoramic picture that they showed us. It was just zeroed in on this bat. It looked like it might have been in a display case. You can see the bat. You can see Albert Bell on the bat, and the bat that I guess it was replaced with was a Paul Sorrento bat or something.
And that was Jason Grimsley, the relief pitcher.
Well, I didn't say that. You did.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
So it was a mess.
Yeah, that. Did you kind of feel like you're in a scene in the movie Mission Impossible?
I came in the office the next day, and the Chicago Police Department was in my office dusting for fingerprints.
No way.
Oh yeah.
Now that's a part of the story.
Now
you
you're
didn't
gonna put handcuffs on me now, or you're gonna be later?
Right.
Part of you had to laugh at that, though, right?
After I changed my underwear, yeah.
Yeah.
Later.
Later, for sure.
Later,
Yeah.
it was, yeah.
Yeah, can you imagine if that happened now with the social media age? Again, all these old stories, it's funny. The other Albert Bell story, the whole Fernando Vina incident in Milwaukee when he forearm shivered him breaking up a double play. Brian Anderson told us the background story on it, and it's kind of been well documented since then. But for our listeners that don't know, walk us through that incident there at Old Counties.
Tell me Brian's story, and I'll let you know if
Okay,
it's right or not.
so Scott, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I guess an inning or two earlier,
Yeah.
Eddie Murray had talked to Albert, got into him, saying to him that he should have taken out the runner to break up the double play.
Same kind of hit.
The same kind of hit. And so what happened was, wouldn't you know it, the same play happened where it was a ground ball to second, and this time Fernando Vina got in the way, and Albert Bell launched him into left field.
That's right. That's what happened. Only after Eddie talked to Albert, I talked to Albert too, and I think my talk with Albert was a little more forceful than what Eddie had said, and Albert took it to heart and smoked him. It was a legal play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was a legal play, but the commissioner at that time had it out for Albert big time,
Yeah.
and was just looking for reasons to punish him.
And
So,
in a way, he got punished too, because later that year, he got hosed out of the MVP award.
oh yeah.
Yeah, Mo Vaughn got it instead of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Well,
wasn't.
that's that was, I thought it was a travesty. I mean, he has 50 home runs, 50 doubles in the same season.
Right.
Plays for a championship team, and doesn't get the MVP. And then, but my biggest beef with this is that Albert Bell and Kirby Puckett have almost identical statistics.
Mm-hmm.
They played the same number of years,
Mm-hmm.
and Albert's not in the Hall of Fame. Kirby is. I think Kirby should be in the Hall of Fame. I'm not saying that at all, but Albert should be also.
Right.
Well, that brings up a different question too. There's a lot of players in that era with the Indians that maybe didn't have the numbers to get in the Hall of Fame, but that should probably be in there. Albert Bell being one, maybe Omar Vizquel and Kenny Lofton as well, and because the voting system is just so different. Old and needs to be adjusted. But you pretty much managed what players that should be in the Hall of Fame.
I managed a number of them. It's absolutely amazing. Manny Ramirez should be in the Hall of Fame. Don't know that he'll ever get in there because of the problems he had with the steroids. Omar, Kenny obviously should be in the Hall of Fame. We got Eddie Murray and Jim Tomei and Robbie Alomar. There's just a number of guys. I know I'm leaving some out, but there's a number of guys that played here during that era that had Hall of Fame careers throughout their career, not just here.
One thing that a lot of people forget about is the pitching. I mean, we didn't have, when you look at the numbers, I mean, our pitching staff back then wasn't the Atlanta Braves, but they got the job done. Yeah. And you had a lot of veterans there that I would imagine led by example. What was it like for a pitching staff like that? I mean, you got Hershiser among others.
Hershiser, Martinez, Nagy, a lot of those guys. The thing that we had good, solid pitchers, but they were all number threes. We didn't have that one dominant number one. And I may be wrong. Go back and check, but I think in every playoff series that we played in, we came away from the opening night 0-1, and then came back. And it was just that we, it's good pitching was a shut down, good hitting, and we didn't have that one dominant guy. I wouldn't have traded Nagy, Martinez, Hershiser, any of those guys for anybody else's guys. They were good guys. They gave you a chance to win. They busted their butts. They paid attention. They helped each other out. They helped other teammates out. That's the one thing that's not ever really said about the ball clubs we had in the 90s. We had stars, but they were all together. They all helped each other out, and I think that has a lot to say about the consistency we had over those years. But our pitchers, they were good. They gave us a chance to win. That's all you can ask.
Was there a trade that you guys meaning you in the front office, or the front office, wanted to make that didn't happen, that you remember that was close?
In '97, we had a deal done for. He ended up pitching in Philly. He ended up pitching in Boston.
Curt Schilling.
We had a deal done for Curt Schilling. Had it done, and he turned the deal down.
He vetoed the
That's
trade?
my understanding. He vetoed the deal.
Wow, I didn't know. I knew there was a trade between you guys and the Phillies with Curt Schilling. I didn't know he vetoed. I thought.
He vetoed it.
Do you remember who Cleveland was going to give up?
Half our ball club.
At the time,
It was pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, those were deals.
I don't remember the particulars of the deal. All I know is that John told me, he said, I knew the deal, we were trying to make the deal. And he said, we've got a deal, all we're waiting on is Schilling to okay the deal. He had no trade clause.
And he wouldn't waive it.
And he wouldn't waive it.
Was there a trade that you guys made in that era in the 90s that you regretted, maybe not at the time, or maybe at the time, but looking back on it?
Regretted making?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I can't say it.
Yeah, right. We just had to ask the question.
We had to ask. I know you and I have talked about 97, and we won't go into it because it was so heartbreaking, but your famous quote, and you've said it to me and you've said it in other interviews, is, hey, Mike, have you gotten over the World Series loss? And your answer is always,
I'll let you know just as soon as it happens.
Right.
Yeah. Still that way.
Still that way.
Yeah.
So you went from the Indians, and you managed Baltimore and Seattle. Going from the Indians to those two teams, talk about the adjustment you had to make. I mean, they were still strong teams, but what were the adjustments going to those two teams?
Well, the adjustment in Baltimore was I went in there and we had an old ball club. We really had an old ball club. They could still play, but it was an old club. And at the All-Star break, Sid Thrift was our general manager. At the All-Star break, I was talking before the All-Star break. I was talking to Sid, and I were talking, and I said, if we're not in this thing, if we're not, we think we have a chance, these guys aren't getting any younger. We can trade some of these guys and get some good young players back. And build for next year, the year after, and so that happened, and we did. The only thing is, the young players we got back just never, 95% of them panned out.
Sure.
So that was different. Every club you go to, they do the same things, but they do them differently. There's different ways to get to where you want to go, and there were times that I didn't necessarily agree with the way we went about what we were doing, but I was, I was kind of, at that time I was pretty well indoctrinated with doing things the way the Indians did because we did it so well.
Yeah.
But it was, I had a good time. I had a good time in Baltimore. It was a great city to live in. Mr. Angelo's treated us all really, really well. And then it was to Seattle, and Seattle is first class all the way. And I really enjoyed my time in Seattle, but it just different atmospheres in different places.
I got to ask you, 2007, I believe it was. Did you really enjoy delaying the snow here on opening day so that game would get called?
I tell people, I said, what's this a shame? Is that I went in 15 minutes. I went from maybe one of the most well-liked and respected sports figures in Cleveland to the most hated sports figure in Cleveland, and so it was. I was just doing my job. I was just trying to do what I was supposed to do, and I'll never forget Paul Bird, slamming me at the papers next day. And I'm sitting there thinking, Paul, he walked the bases loaded.
Yeah.
With 2 outs, he couldn't throw a strike. All he had to do was throw one strike, and the game was over. He had a no-hitter. And then, but as it turned out, we didn't play. It was great for me because we ended up staying here for 4 days, and I didn't. I got to stay at home, see the kids, and live a normal life for 4 days in the middle of the season.
I was at that game actually, by the way. I was sitting behind your dugout.
Oh, there's a guy screaming at me one night. That night, screaming at me. You can see the veins in his neck popping out. Hargrove, you used to be an Indian. You know how it is to be an Indian. Holy, this guy, if he had a gun or a knife or a bow and arrow, he would have visited on me.
So Did you manage a summer league team in Kansas? Is that correct?
You know what? There was a summer collegiate team in Liberal, Kansas, which is 48 miles north of my hometown in the Panhandle of Texas. And when I was in high school and in college, that team was one of the top teams in the nation. I mean, there were a lot of big time players. There were something like 50 major league players that came through there and played there, or played there. Either 50 that played or managed in the big leagues. So I mean, it was a big time program, and it had fallen on hard times. And the good friend of mine, his name was Bob Carlisle. He owned a sand and asphalt company, and it was a town of maybe 25,000 people. And Sharon and I, on our way back after residing in Seattle, we're on our way back, stopping. And I told you Sharon could take a 3-day trip and turn it into 2.5 weeks, but this was working on about 3.5. Stopped in Liberal after we saw family in Perryton. Stopped in Liberal and went to a game, talking to Bob. And Bob said, "You should come back and manage this team next year." I said, "Sure, Bob, that's what I'll do," and let it go. Well, he got Sharon's ear.
Oh boy!
And so we left. And for the next day and a half, I heard nothing about you should do that. You should do that. You owe Bob, because I was playing in Liberal when I got drafted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called Bob. I said, "Okay, I'll do it." He said, "Well, I can't pay you much." And I said, "Okay, give me $1 a year, and I'll give 95 cents of that to Sharon as my agent. She talked me into this." And so I did. We went back, stayed. He had a nice house, full basement that was finished, and had a bedroom down there and a bathroom. He's like a separate house now, and stayed with him all summer and dressed in the parking lot at the ballpark and had a blast.
Oh, I
it
can
was
imagine.
a lot of fun. We ended up going to the national tournament to qualify for the national tournament that year, and finished 5th in the nation. Next year we finished 3rd.
Kind of brought you back to baseball.
Well, it really did. It was really a lot of fun. Really, I enjoyed. I never didn't enjoy baseball, but I kind of rekindled my enjoyment of baseball when I was there.
As we sit here in the suite, you have a lot of family around coming and going here in the suite. And when you were talking about the story of managing, in Kansas like that, and, the integral part your wife has played in the family and your life, just talk about that, because it's something that a lot of people don't necessarily always hear about.
When I was a rookie, in rookie ball, this is right after I came out of college and got drafted and went to Geneva, New York. I played for a guy, a big man, and I can't think of his last name, like an idiot, but first name was Bill. and he said that he had a meeting with us all the time, and he said, "You guys, you need to go out, find you a good woman that'll support you." See, because behind every successful player in the game is a good woman. And I thought, well, I think I've got one already. I can't hardly kick her to the side. And she's pretty sharp. She keeps me on the straight and narrow. And there's sometimes that somebody asks me to do something, I'll say, I don't want to do that. And she'll shame me into doing it. It was the right thing to do for me to do it. So she really is the glue that holds our entire family together. And the kids would disown me before they'd disown their nana.
How many kids you have and how many grandkids you have?
I think we got 5 kids and we have 15 grandkids.
Wow.
So I think we raised rabbits, not children.
They keep you young, right?
They keep you busy.
Yeah. 2 more questions and we'll let you go because we want to enjoy the first pitch here shortly. What is your thoughts on the state of baseball as it is now? New rules this year. It's been a success. The game's different now than it was when you were a player or when you were a manager.
Yeah. I think some of the rules I really like. Surprisingly, I like the pitch clock. I like that. I don't like what the replays become. For me, I think it should be out calls at first base and fair and foul balls, and that's it. And maybe place at home. But the guy at second base, extra innings, I think is a dumbed down of our game. I think it's just taking and then taking away the manager's ability to manage the game from the 7th inning on. For example, now you've got to have you're bringing a relief pitcher in, he's got to face 3 hitters. Well, used to, you bring in, we had Ossenmacher and Plunk and Mason and these guys.
Shuey,
we get this Shuey, we get the 7th inning. We could bring Ossenmacher in to face Griffey and Plunk in to face Buhner and Mason to finish them off. So where you could really manage the game from the 7th inning on. We won a lot of ball games being able to have the ability to do that. It's not so much. It's not that so much anymore, and that I miss the manager's arguing. I kind of enjoy that.
How did I know you were going to say that?
Is there an art to that? Like when you go out,
Well, it is. I never learned it.
There's always a magic word.
Yeah.
There's a magic word. Okay, you get thrown out. All right, now you can get your piece in, and the umpires kind of know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they know how that works.
Yeah, they do. There are times that you go out to argue, and you know that when you're going out there, you're going to get thrown out.
Yeah.
Because the team kind of needs a kick in the butt, and the team also needs. It's a great way for the manager to exhibit to the players. Like, hey, look, I got as much skin in this game as you do. I've got your back, even though I think you were out and you made the right call.
Yeah.
I'll give you the business just to support what you're saying. So I think it takes away that ability. I just for me it's. Most of the rules I think are good, but those ones I mentioned, I think they just really kind of put us on a place to where it's kind of a production.
Sure. Last question. The current Guardians team, we've made some moves. Right now we're 500. Talk about the recent moves, the outlook for the Guardians. What do you like about this team?
The thing I like about this team is the way they play the game. They play it all out. Sometimes they don't play it too smart on the bases, but you're getting 100% out of them. As far as the recent moves go, I understand some of the players are upset about the moves and thinking that maybe the front office gave up on them too early. I think that our front office over the years has done a tremendous job with a smaller budget in bringing this team together and allowing us to be able to experience a playoff team. So I think that our front office needs to get the benefit of the doubt. They believe it or not, I think a lot of people think that you get into meetings and you talk about trades, you talk about free agents, you talk about this. You got a handful of darts in your hand and you're throwing them at a board to figure out what it is you're going to do. And that couldn't be farther from. They discuss and talk things through to the point to where you start to pull your hair out because there's nothing else to discuss. Our front office has done a good job, and they will do a good job, and I don't think they've given up with this team too early. I think that they made a good move. We're still in this thing.
Do you think they were the playoffs?
Do I think they get the playoffs? Only because 2 reasons. Because of the division we're playing in, and also that Tito's worked magic before. So, there's a way they'll find it.
Well, Mike, this has been a pleasure to speak with you and to see you again with your family. Thank you so much for letting us, inviting us into your booth, your suite here, and first pitch is about to get underway, so we're going to let you enjoy it with your family. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on our podcast.
You and Scott are the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
And remember, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple and Spotify. Just look up Sable Brothers and the Baseline Podcast. You can follow yours truly at John_Sable on Twitter. Follow the pod at Sable Brothers.
And you can follow me, Scott Sable, on Twitter at Scott Sable, FOX, the number 8, Instagram, Facebook. You know where to find me.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll check you back next time.